Today on the Essential Coaching Skills podcast, we have a second conversation with Robert Vetter. Bob's ability to articulate his methods of traditional soul healing is nothing short of remarkable and absolutely fascinating. Join us as we discuss more of how these ancient practices can help bring healing to our modern world. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. All right, I am here once again with Bob Vetter, Robert Vetter. Bob, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks for having me back.
It's really great to have you back because I was fascinated by our discussion last time, and gosh, I wish I remembered every word that you said, but I'm going to see if I can prime your memory and get that font of information start flowing again. As I recall, last time we were speaking, you were talking about traumas and how that when a person is traumatized, a little piece of them remains there or something like that is left behind. A susto, was that correct?
Correct.
And that's analogous to people these days often, because they're so bound to remembering that thing. It's almost like a piece of them is still back there. A piece of them is still back at that moment in time when that happened.
Exactly.
And I also today I would love to get more information from you about also the basic theme of this podcast in general is essential coaching skills. And I'd like to find out from you what really are essential to you as far as being able to be a great coach, and maybe also, how you deal with various issues with your business and how to. Okay, does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Can you pick up where we left off? What was it about that susto?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of recap what we said about susto.
Okay.
Susto is considered by anthropologists to be a culture-bound syndrome. And the idea is found all over Latin America. And it is the idea that we experience soul loss when we have a particular type of fright. So I said that it overlaps trauma, but it's not synonymous with trauma. It could sometimes be something that we might consider relatively minor. For example, I have one teacher from Mexico who is convinced that somebody should never take a baby and toss the baby up in the air because that causes susto. So any time that you have an experience where you go like that and you lose your breath like that because of that sudden moment of fright, that's an example of a susto.
Really?
And so these sustos can be really, really major, as I said, an extreme trauma, like a woman being raped or experiencing being there for a murder. Right. Those are major sustos, but then there are minor sustos as well. And every time it happens, a little piece of you is left behind. So, we could argue whether that piece of you is a piece of your soul, if it's a symbolic understanding, but we could say some part of us gets left behind. The way I like to describe it is that a piece of your vitality is left at that time, at that place.
Okay.
So in ceremony, when we go back to it, we go there with the idea of stalking that energy, of finding that energy that was left behind.
That is very picturesque language, stalking the energy. You're like that.
Well, I'm using that. That's not necessarily what everybody else would say, but that's the way I look at it, is that we're stalking the piece of energy that was left behind.
In order to bring it back. In order to bring it back.
So in the ceremonial way that I was taught in curanderismo, since we experience it often as that moment where you lose your breath. We actually do that to the patient or the client.
What do you mean you do
We
that?
actually recreate that moment. So one of the ways that we do it is by blowing mescal onto the person, onto the back of their neck.
You do what now?
So you
you blow mescal onto the back of their neck?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
you
part of it.
Probably can't do that over Zoom very well, right?
You can't do it over Zoom very well. That's true. But so this, it actually takes practice to do that, believe it or not.
I would think so. Yeah, no, I get it.
You vaporize it literally from your mouth by blowing it. It's called soplando, where you blow this mezcal onto the person.
Mezcal is like tequila.
Correct.
Yeah. And
I mean, that's a piece of the ceremony.
So you're spitting on your clients, basically.
Yes. But the point is, what it does is it re-shocks the person.
Yeah.
And it connects them to what occurred at that time and at that place.
Well, it's fascinating. You should be telling me this. A number of years ago, man, I taught some workshops that were called "How Deep the Rabbit Hole." How deep the rabbit hole, and fascinating story. I had a guy come. I wanted to teach these seminars that were not just how-to seminars, but they were experiential seminars. They were places where we would go and do deep trance stuff, do deep hypnosis things, and breath walks in the woods, and just be out there. And so we did trance dancing, and I got these drummers to come, and we literally were listening to these African drummers. It took place in Vermont, so these were not African drummers. These were white Vermonters, but they had learned African drumming, and they were darn good at it. And they had their drums, and it was, man, it was amazing. It was feeling the drums, not just listening to them, but like feeling, because they're big and they're in the room and they're pulsating off you. It was an amazing experience. And I got hold of this guy who was a shaman, an actual shaman. It said so right in the phone book. He was a shaman. So I looked up under the yellow pages under shaman, and I found this guy. But he really was one, and he this, I think, Mexican tradition of shamanism. But he set up this, what he called a mesa, in the middle of the seminar room floor. It was basically a bear skin that he put all these different artifacts on and things in a sort of medicine wheel sort of shape into the four directions. And then there was this one woman in our group who was kind of experiencing some challenges, and he was working with her specifically. And at one point he had this bottle, I think it was water, but it might have been mezcal now that you mention it. And he took a big swig of it, and then he just spit it all. He just like vaporized it all over her, and she like fell backwards. He was very quick and caught her, but I mean, it just like threw her into this trance. It was an amazing, shock to the system. He didn't explain and say, in a moment, I'm going to. He did not do that at all. Everyone was shocked, I think, as she was. But is that sort of what you're talking about? Is that what you're doing there?
Yeah. Now, my guess is, since he used the word mesa, that he probably was a practitioner of Peruvian shamanism.
Okay. Because
they employ the use of a mesa, which is a particular type of altar. And they also use Florida water in the way that you described.
Okay.
So Florida water literally means a flowered water, but it has alcohol as its base, and there is a commercial version of it, and then there are like homemade versions of it. And they use it very much the way that you described.
Okay.
Blowing it onto the person. So yes, it is similar.
Wow.
And it takes place at various times during a curing ceremony.
So if a person came to you for coaching, would they be expecting like these curing ceremonies, like these native curing ceremonies type things? Or
well, yes and no. I mean, a lot of the work that I do right now is all the work that I do now is on Zoom. So rather than me setting up an altar for them, a lot of the work that I do now is with people where they set up the altar for themselves. So I describe the way that they use the 4 directions, the articles that they place on those directions, which are symbolic of the 4 elements. And then we also use, what's a little bit different is that we also use symbols, things that come up over and over again. Like, I'm very careful to pay attention to language patterns and words that people use over and over again. And we try to connect those to symbols. And the symbols can be placed at different places on the altar, depending on the time in the stage in our time together that the person is working on. So whether they're beginning something new, whether they're looking at the dark side of themselves, whether they're looking for transformation or transmutation of one thing into another, or to put it into practice. There are various places on the altar where we do these things. So yes, ceremony is important to me. As my work has matured, I've sort of made it very specific to what's going on with that person at that time. And something that you'll be familiar with is looking at what their strengths are already. So, for example, if I'm working with someone who is an artist, then we'll try to use symbolism that comes out of their imagination and that is created in artwork that we'll use on the altar. For somebody else who is a writer, I'll have them journaling, and we'll use the journal entries and position them at different places on the altar and construct ceremony that is very specific to that person. But the soul retrieval part of it is something that I often do.
And that comes back to the susto.
Yeah, to the susto. So, I'm not there to do, I've had to change that around a little bit because a lot of it, that the training that I had in it is tactile, is touching the person, putting things on the person, blowing something onto the person, even at the end of it, massaging the person's hands or their feet at the end of the ceremony, and then covering them up with a white sheet. There are all of these elements that I learned that we can't do through Zoom, but we can do other aspects of it that we kind of put together and creatively use over Zoom.
Wow, that's so interesting. So a ceremony then is kind of not a scripted thing, obviously, but it follows a ceremony, follows an order and a syntax, but it's made personalized by the individual's strengths. Like if they're a writer, then you write things, and if they're a painter, they paint things or whatever to put on the altar.
Exactly. So I think of every session that I have with somebody as being a ceremony. So we begin it by smudging, by burning something to purify the space. So normally I would do that for the person, but since we're doing it over Zoom, I'm purifying myself. The client is purifying him or herself, and then we purify the room in order to set the stage for it. So what we're doing is we're separating out sacred space from normal everyday life. And that is the container that everything takes place in. Then at the end of the work that we do together, we smudge again, and we purify ourselves, and then a clockwise movement that seals in the energy and the change that was created during that session.
Wow. That sounds absolutely fascinating. So you'd mentioned something to me, if I recall correctly, about the East and the West being part of it.
Yes. So you'll be familiar with this. And it, when I came across through you, sleight of mouth, this part is something that I was already very much familiar with. And it's understanding the limiting beliefs that a person has. And there are clues for it, as I also mentioned. If you pay very close attention to the language patterns that a person uses, we'll get a sense of a limiting belief. So I'll try to articulate that belief. If A, then B, and that means C. I mean, very similar to the way that you put it in your book and in your work on sleight of mouth. The way that we deal with that ceremonially is to take the limiting belief and go to the direction of the West, which is the direction of the setting sun, and offer it up. Ask the spirit of the West to take from me the limitations that that belief have placed on me.
Wow.
Talk to the spirit of the West as if it is a person, and ask for the help of the spirit of the West.
Wow.
And so all of the language that we use when we go to the West is negative language. So all of the things that I don't want, I don't talk about anything that I do want. I talk about what I'd like to be rid of. And then once everything has been said, everything has been expended, then we turn our attention to the direction of the East, the rising sun, the new beginning. And we install the new belief, the empowering belief that can make a difference.
Wow, that's fascinating. So how do you do that? How do you install a new belief?
So the new belief is we figured that out during the Plática, so that if you go back to the formula that I described earlier, it was, I think I meant, well, if I didn't, let me...
Yeah, remind us, pretend we don't know.
So there's two parts to it, the heart-to-heart talk and then the ceremonial part. So the heart-to-heart talk is the bringing out the story that has been hidden. So there's always the story that the person brings to the event, and then there's always the underlying story, the one that you dig for deeper and deeper, the layers of the onion that you keep peeling back to go deeper and deeper. And usually that belief is one of those things that is lying hidden until it reveals itself, I guess I would say, from the type of talk that goes on. So then all of those get taken and turned into something ceremonial. And I mean, you could look at the ceremonial part and say that there is a deep religious or spiritual significance. And I wouldn't argue that is true or false. I would say that that's one level of understanding it. On another level, we can say that it makes it real in the mind of the person. So we could say that there is a modern psychological way to look at symbols as unlocking information, giving us access to a part of our mind that we don't normally go to.
Right.
To unlock
the symbols that you use, are they standardized, or do you create new symbols for every person?
No, we're creating symbols for that person.
So could you give us an example of that? Let's just say hypothetically that I was your client and I had a problem with, I don't know, you don't get anything so simple as, quitting smoking or something, but you might get addictions.
Okay, so then what I would do is I would say, all right, so you're having a problem with tobacco.
Okay.
And I would say, okay, let's take tobacco and let's put a pack of cigarettes on your altar.
Okay.
So that rather than consider it something evil that we want to get rid of, we're going to take that pack of cigarettes and we're going to start it out on the east side of the altar. And we're going to communicate with the spirit of tobacco. And maybe I'll even make an offering to tobacco. Maybe I'll even say, let's put some food down for tobacco. And let's communicate with the spirit of tobacco about the change in the relationship that I'd like to have with it. So that rather than ruling my life, that I can come to understand it in a different way.
Wow, fascinating. Wow.
I mean, that's where I would start. And I think I've also, tobacco's a tricky one because in indigenous societies, tobacco has a sacred significance.
Right.
So that's an even better reason to have a relationship with tobacco that's not based on me using it for my personal pleasure,
right,
but it's using it in prayer. So one of the things I recommend to people is if you're a smoker and you want to quit smoking, go back to the root reason for tobacco in the first place, of prayer, and make sure that every time you smoke, you pray.
Wow. Cool. Love it. Hey, so the symbols then would not necessarily be something drawn on a piece of paper, but it might be a symbolic pack of cigarettes or a symbolic rock or cell phone or, some object. Could be
an object, or it can be I've had people do written symbols. Yeah, we do that also.
Okay. Drawn on a piece of paper.
Drawn on a piece of paper. And then, we put it at a place on the altar and change its position as we work through the symbol and the issue.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And what it does, like I said, what you could look at that as a spiritual thing, and and it is. You can also look at it psychologically and say that something that begins inside of me in a metaphorical way or an analogous way, this thing that is a problem inside of me, if I can take it outside of me and objectify it in some way, now it's open to my understanding. It's open to my manipulation. It's open to my change, as opposed to being inside where I view it as intrinsically my own and therefore not able to change.
Right. I love it. That's really good. I mean, it's interesting to think about how the ceremonies could be, highly spiritual and thought of as a spiritual ceremony. And it could also be a psychological
tool,
technique, process, tool. And then these things are symbolic of these. It doesn't have to be, Jesus or God or the Great Spirit or whatever, but it's a symbolic of, that greater part of me or the other conscious mind or that sort of thing. It can be symbolic of these other parts of us. That an evil spirit might be just a part of me I don't like and I want to get rid of and process. But it can be thought of as symbolic in this kind of processing, which is interesting.
So I would describe it as social and spiritual and psychological, that all of these things are going on at the same time. So I also ask a person what their religious or spiritual beliefs are.
Okay.
Because, in this form of work, I consider that critical to understanding the person and how they can bring in their belief about any transcendent power as being part of the process.
Yeah.
But not as waving a magic wand. So
if somebody came in and was highly Christian or Jewish or Islamic or whatever, could you still do these ceremonies? Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll use the language of, like, I don't consider myself a Christian, but I will pray to the spirit of Jesus on behalf of somebody.
I see.
And the way that I explain it is that this is a three-way partnership. That it's me, it's you, and your belief of whatever is beyond, whatever is transcendent, whatever is a power bigger than you.
And what if the person doesn't have that? What if they're an atheist?
Then I would say, well, what is the ultimate reality to you? Is there an organizing principle that underlies things? Whether you call it something spiritual or religious or not. Or what is foundational to you? And maybe it's the idea, maybe it's just a concept that, for example, atheists tend to be very, very ethical people. So is there an underlying ethical principle that connects you with everything that is? If not, maybe your scientific Do you think that there is some ultimate organizing factor, some organizing principle that underlies things, that keeps things in order instead of total chaos?
Cool.
We can apply anything that is beyond the material
as the third element.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And then there's a part that I play.
Yeah.
I'm going to facilitate your healing. I'll explain what my responsibilities are. And then I'll say, well, what do you think your responsibilities are? What can you do in this that shows that you are not expecting the change to be done for you, that proves that you are a willing agent in your own change?
Oh, that's so great. That's so great. It's so great. I love that. I resonate with that so much because in my own work as a hypnotherapist and NLP practitioner over the years, I've always felt that the, hypnosis or processes, it was always a cooperative experience. It wasn't just me working on you and, it's my responsibility to fix you. It's like, no. It's our responsibility. And we will together work on this. And I almost invariably give people homework assignments of some kind or another, whether it's to, listen to a hypnotic trance or to do some self-hypnosis or something. They're going to be involved in the process. It's not just me,
Exactly.
Because they need to be. I think they really need to be. And it's funny too, because sometimes, with Ericksonian work, I've been very indirect. And sometimes I've had people that have thought like, well, this hypnosis didn't work at all. I say, well, how come you've lost 30 pounds? It's like, well, yeah, but I did that all on my own. And I'm going like, okay, yeah. That's right.
Exactly. That's perfect.
Yeah, good. Good. So, Bob, what do you think are essential coaching skills? I mean, this is so different than most people's coaching, but still, what do you consider to be essential coaching skills?
So I started on this one in our last session, but one is what I would describe as sacred listening. And sacred listening goes beyond what we think of as listening. Most people don't listen. Most people hear, but they don't listen. So there is a kind of concentrated compassion that I think is a way of listening, a way of being with a person. I mentioned it last time. I believe the way that I explained it was to be able to be with a person in their pain.
Yeah.
It doesn't end there. It begins there. But a person who is truly heard, it's said that pain that is shared is cut in half. And that's kind of a way to start, so that there is this concentrated listening, which is the capacity to be with a person in their discomfort. One of the things that people tend to do when they're around someone who is suffering in one way or another is to try to change it in that moment, to try to tell them, oh, you don't need to be that way. You need to look at it this way. And while I'm not saying that a therapist or a coach's job is to accept everything the way it is and leave it that way, they have to enter into the world of the other person before the rapport is created that can even begin to go along with change. So this, in my opinion, is a skill. And there are certain people who seem to be born with it and others who can develop it as a skill. And I've seen master healers, and there's something about their presence, something about being with them that goes beyond anything that words can say or do.
Yeah.
So I'd consider sacred listening to be one essential coaching skill.
Beautiful. And if I may, that it jibes very well with one of the things that I've been teaching for years in my classes, which is active listening, where you kind of repeat back to the person what they've just said to make sure you've heard it correctly. And that what's fascinating about that is a lot of times when you use their same words back to them in a very real way, they're hearing it for the first time because
Exactly.
the part of their brain that hears things is different from the part of the brain that formulates language. So although they just said it, it just came out of their mouth, they didn't hear it. So
No, and they process it in a completely different way and may even attach different meanings to it. You know, I've had people say, well, what you just said was, X, Y, and Z. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah.
Right.
I can't believe I thought that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it also jibes with something I've learned from Stephen Gilligan, which is to be welcoming, in his coach state that he's developed with Robert Dilts. I'm not sure what all those letters stand for in the acronym of coaching. I should look it up. I'm sure I can. It's in the first podcast I did, second podcast I did. But the H, I'm darn right pretty sure it stands for hospitable, being hospitable, which is to welcome in, the negative, if you will, state, whatever the thing is that you want to get rid of. It's like, well, let's just sit with it. Let's just welcome it in. Let's just be here and let all parts of us be here, be present
Exactly.
at this very moment.
Exactly. Because, there also is, we in some ways have a culture where we don't allow people to express that side of themselves. It's not welcome in normal conversation because it makes people uncomfortable.
Right.
So just by opening the space, creating a sacred space and saying, whatever you bring here is acceptable.
Yeah.
Anything that you bring here is okay.
Beautiful.
So for another example, we talked about the Temazcal, I think last time, the Mesoamerican sweat lodge that I'm involved in also. Mm-hmm. I tell people, and I've heard it said before that this is like going to a church in one way, except this is a church where you can scream obscenities if that's what you need to in the moment.
Wow.
So that anything is acceptable. Anything can be expressed here, because what moves is healthy and what is stuck generates lack of health.
Got it. So sacred listening. I love that. That's just such a beautiful way of describing it. It's just, that's beautiful. What else is then there for
So
you?
another one is connecting emotions to the story. Because a lot of times when somebody tells you a story, what they'll do is they'll go into the minutia, the details of every aspect of the story, and they'll tell it in a very matter-of-fact way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas what marks experience is the emotions that we connect with something. So in understanding what the emotions are that I've attached to parts of that story, we can then find out, well, what are the emotions that you want to experience? And so that's why in a lot of even in the ceremonies, we ask to go from the toxic side of emotions, the limitations that these emotions place on us, to other emotions, to using them in a positive way to affect change. But we use the language of emotions to initiate that shift.
Okay.
So it's looking at language in a different way. All right. So just throw out any example
of a change I want to make as a client.
Yeah.
Well, we used smoking before. Let's use, I just want to do something really banal and typical for a hypnotist. I want to lose 50 pounds. I want to lose 20 pounds.
Why do you want to lose 20 pounds?
Because I'm fat. And it's healthy. Be healthier. My blood pressure's high, and I don't look good. I've gained weight over this COVID situation, and my pants are too tight, and I would feel better if I lost 20 pounds.
So tell me a little bit about your eating patterns. What do you eat on an average day?
Mostly chocolate chip cookies and bananas.
And tell me about the impulse to go and eat a chocolate chip cookie.
I
What
hope
is
you're
it
not
that,
expecting serious answers here, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, when you decide that you're going to eat a chocolate chip cookie, take me through that experience. What goes on in your mind before you pick up that chocolate chip cookie?
Well, I think first I think, okay, well, I haven't eaten in the past 10 minutes, so I should probably eat something before I starve. So what would be the easiest? That's kind of the process I go through. And then I see this carton of cookies that I've purchased, and I thought, yeah, that's it. That'd be easiest, fastest, and let's go.
So tell me about the emotions now that you experience before you eat the chocolate chip cookie and after.
Well, before I eat the chocolate chip cookie, I have this emotion of, I don't know, it's just kind of like almost, I don't want to say desperation, but it's a feeling of like, I need to change my state. I'm nervous, I'm scared, I'm anxious, kind of like that. And then after the chocolate chip cookie, I can go like, okay, I can go back to sleep now.
Mm-hmm. So what are the emotion that you described before you ate the chocolate chip cookie was a sense of desperation.
Well, I didn't want to say desperation because it is not, that's a bit extreme, but it's a little bit of anxiousness, a little bit of, yeah.
And what experience would you like to have? If anxiety is an experience that you don't enjoy, what is it? What kind of emotions would you like to have on a regular basis?
I would like to just, feel happy and satisfied.
Happy and satisfied.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are things that you do otherwise that make you happy and satisfied?
I love walking in nature, and besides eating chocolate chip cookies, let me see. Walking in nature is good. Playing the piano.
Great.
Yes.
So obviously where we're going with this is we're going to reinforce the things that you do that express those emotions.
I see. Okay.
And then give you opportunities to experience those emotions on a more regular basis.
Cool. Nice. Got it. So that's a big piece. You consider that to be an essential coaching skill, to be able to name the emotions that are associated with whatever behavior is there.
Both what the things that are limiting to you that you don't want, as well as articulating what it is that you do want through emotions rather than specific elements in a story. I mean, you can use elements in a story, but we're inserting the emotions into it.
And that's because you believe the emotions are the driving.
They're the key to change. They're the key to understanding even memories. If we don't engage emotions, we don't form memories.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Or at least not as easily. When we engage the emotions, what it does is it lets everybody know something important is going on here, whether it's good or bad.
Right. Good. Wow. So are there any other skills that you'd consider to be essential coaching skills?
Yeah, well, so we mentioned beliefs. When I mentioned going to the east and going to the west,
yeah,
I consider beliefs to be an absolute essential coaching skill.
What do you mean by that? I don't know. What you
mean. To uncover the beliefs that we have that to a large extent determine our behaviors and our experience of the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's just say hypothetically again that I'm the guy that wants to lose 20 pounds, and that although I was making that up, let's pretend that it's true that I eat a lot of chocolate chip cookies and bananas. We talked about the emotions. How do you uncover the beliefs?
So I'll give you an extreme example. I've been working with a client who I didn't even know had an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only the result of working together for a long time until we discovered what the nature of that was. And it was a belief that she is not entitled to have food that she enjoys.
Wow.
And
Okay. How did you go about uncovering that belief? Was it through questioning? Was it that?
Yeah, it was
listening?
questioning. I mean, understand also that we had already uncovered a whole series of other beliefs, but this one was absolutely foundational because it was based on a belief of not being good enough, not deserving to be fed properly, and even an idea of being harmful to other people. And it was all connected to food, and that didn't come out until a lot of other ground had been covered.
Wow. Wow. So, okay. So could you just give us a 50-cent version of how do you go about uncovering a belief? What is the process by which you would do that?
So, okay, let me think this through. Can
you use me as an example?
Back to the chocolate chip cookies?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
What would you do in that case? I mean, you've uncovered the emotion.
Yeah.
That's
so the emotion is that you have anxiety.
Yeah.
And you reach for the cookie.
Right. And afterwards I feel like I can go back to sleep, I said.
Yeah. So take me back to, and there may be a susto connected with this. In the case that I just told you about the eating disorder, there were a series of sustos that led up to the establishing of that belief. Mm-hmm. So I might ask you, well, tell me about eating in your household that you grew up in.
Well, when I was a kid, my grandmother lived with us, and my father was a raging alcoholic, and my mother was a school teacher who was like never home, and so my grandmother really took care of us, but she couldn't, communicate very well. She didn't speak English very well, so she mostly baked for us when we came home from school and stuff. She'd bake cookies and bake pies and bake things. So that's how I knew everything was okay.
So you developed a belief that if I eat a cookie, what does that mean? I would ask you, what does that mean?
So if I eat a cookie, well, then
yeah.
Then I'm safe at home with grandma, and I'm loved. I'm safe. I'm okay.
So cookies equal safety.
Yeah, and love.
And love.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean that's obvious. Everybody knows that.
So if we look at the result of that, of a lifetime of eating cookies, that means safety and love. What we also have is an unhealthy weight gain. Is that right?
Well, that might be partly.
Well, that's why you came to me in the first place.
That might be partly responsible for my weight gain. Are you saying chocolate chip cookies make me fat? What are you?
What I'm saying is that you came to me because you identified this as a problem.
Okay.
I'm not judging. Okay, so cookies mean safety and love.
Yes.
For you.
Yes.
Now, looking at it today, would you say that those are an equivalent or not?
Well, speaking as a 35-year-old man, fully grown adult that I am now, plus 30 years, I would say that logically, no, it doesn't mean that. Cookies are confection. They're a sugar-laden, fat-filled confection that have nothing to do with love or anything else. It's just a baked good.
So what are some examples of ways that you have felt love that did not include cookies?
Well, holding hands with my wife and, going for walks in nature together and talking.
And if you had a choice of having somebody who loved you and who you loved versus eating a cookie by yourself, which one would you take?
Okay, good. So I'm beginning to see how you go about unearthing these beliefs then.
Yeah.
Cool. So three essential coaching skills that I'm gathering you from so far is, one is sacred listening. Two is to identify emotions that are attached to various behaviors that are going on there. What is the emotions there? And then also the beliefs that are entwined probably with the emotions.
Exactly.
Wow, cool. Got it. And Bob, can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
This might be a little personal. Can I don't know.
You have full permission.
Yeah? All right. Well, all right then, Bob. You are a cultural anthropologist.
Guilty as charged.
You've been studying anthropology for a long time, and obviously you know an awful lot about it. And you've also been adopted in some native cultures, right? You were adopted into some cultures. And everything you've been talking to us, I mean, language, sustos, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know these words. And I know vaguely of kind of some of the things you've been describing because I've witnessed them, or like I said, in the experience I had teaching that class of how deep the rabbit hole, I had some experiences with shaman, et cetera. But are you concerned at all about, being basically a white guy from Long Island to be doing these native rituals as your practice, basically a sacred native ritual?
So, yes, I am concerned about it. And what I would say is that there is a difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is, to me, cultural appropriation is when somebody goes in a casual way, they go to another culture as a tourist. They bring something back like a souvenir. And then they take the souvenir out of context and they sell it. That's what I would call cultural appropriation. What is different in what has happened to me is that I have been, in the course of learning these other cultures, I've also developed a lifelong connection with the cultures, with the families, with the people, and have an ongoing relationship with them. And in the case of the things that I do, that I use in my work, I have the encouragement of people who want to see that utilized. So, for
encouragement of people from the native cultures.
My teachers, the people who have taught me the things that I use, they've encouraged me to share those in a wider world. So what I like to say is that the work that I do is culturally informed, that it's informed by the experiences that I've had. So I am a white guy from Long Island. I'm a white guy from Long Island who underwent a lot of personally transformative experiences and my own healing in order to get to where I am now, in order to be able to help other people.
And you didn't do that just on Long Island. You went to Oklahoma and
Mexico.
And the families that you've been adopted into are Oklahoman?
Yeah. So Southern Plains tribes.
Mm-hmm. What tribes?
Comanche, Kiowa, Cheyenne, Caddo.
Wow. Cool.
And I, the healing practices that I utilize, though, are, I am personally informed. I don't heal using those techniques from those cultures.
Okay.
My life has been altered through that, and it informs the work that I do. Some of the techniques that I use come out of curanderismo, which is Mexican, and that is a body of teachings that my teachers have encouraged me to take out into the world, to make them my own, to use them creatively, and to share this medicine with others.
Nice. Thank you. That's a great answer. That's a great answer. Wow, gosh, as before, I could talk to you all day, and we've had you back twice now. I'm thinking, when's the next time I can get him back? Because there's so much more I want to learn and talk to you about, but I don't want to take too much more of your time. I appreciate so much your willingness, your generosity to spend this much time with us and to be so forthcoming and honest and open about the way you do and your approaches to things. It's a beautiful thing.
My pleasure, Doug, and someday we could do part 3 if you want.
Okay, that'd be great. Well, thank you. Bob Vetter, how do people get hold of you? Do you have a website?
They will be able to find my website in the very near future, bobvetter.com.
All right.
In the meantime, I hope people will also listen to my podcast, which is Healing and Spirituality in World Cultures, on iTunes, iHeartRadio, all the major platforms, and by email at my very, very old dinosaur-like email address, bobv1111@aol.com.
Is that 1111? Is that like 1111?
It's 4 ones.
Oh, okay.
bobv1111@aol.com.
Cool. And your bobvetter.com, is that just one word, Bob Vetter?
Yes, bobvetter, all one word.com.
2 T's Vetter. Beautiful. Well, Bob Vetter, thank you again for being here.
Doug, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Well, that does it for another episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I certainly enjoyed having you here. Hey, if you want more information about Sleight of Mouth, you can find it at essentialcoachingskills.com, or you might even check out sleihtofmouth.org. That's a nice website too. Thanks. Stay safe. Stay curious.